Good morning. It is Monday, February 6th. This is a regular meeting of the Planning Commission, and we have 4 agenda items. So the Planning Commission reserves 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting for public comment. The public may comment on any matter except for items scheduled for public hearing or public hearing items for which the record is already closed. Which is not the case right now in terms of record being already closed. Generally, the time is limited to 3 minutes, but at this point, I'm not sure how many, I haven't received any green cards. Anybody from the public? No. Okay, we don't have any comments today. And I'm going to give the public one more chance. Our public of one, items from commission and staff. So do we have any items from the commission? Want to start there? Additional items?
Last time.
Yeah, Commissioner Baker.
I'll just mention that the Historic Review Board had a meeting last Thursday because they're planning again. It's Historic Preservation Month in May, and so it takes a while to organize these things. So there are a bunch of plans underway for events, and one of them I just mentioned because it's kind of interesting. There was an older fellow in the community named George Warner. He used to walk around in a suit, and
Oh, yeah.
and he made all of these, I guess, paintings, and sold them around to businesses in town. He painted Eugene in the old days. Well, he passed away. He lived from 1918 to 1998. And his paintings are in offices all over downtown, and the library and the courthouse. So we're trying to arrange an exhibit of his paintings for the historic, and it's being determined where we could get a venue. It could be the Broadway Center, or the Halt Center has a room possibly. But anyways, I thought I mentioned that because that might be interesting to people to see all these old paintings of what Eugene used to look like.
So Commissioner Baker, as we get closer to May, is there, and this is really for Planning Commission and for the public watching, where should they find out what the agenda or what that week is going to look like?
Well, they're planning on doing a bunch of promotion, and there'll be another couple of meetings between now and then. Once I know what the plans are, then I will mention them. But I know for certain that we're going to have a table at Saturday Market for those weekends, all weekends in May, and they usually have some photographs and maps of Eugene, and so. And we did it last year as well, and that worked out very well. So, but I will keep the rest of the Planning Commission appraised of when we know more. They're still doing some planning. They're planning they had a tour last year of, they called Mid-Century Modern, and they're trying to organize something similar again. So we'll see what happens. And we're trying to also, last year we didn't work because of timings. Springfield only meets quarterly, so we didn't really coordinate with Springfield. We're going to try to coordinate with Springfield this time, and also possibly get the local Emerald Photographic Society to sponsor a photo competition.
Perfect.
So.
Well, thank you very much. And Commissioner Randall.
It actually might be appropriate if it works out to get that as part of the First Friday Art Walk too.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great.
I know it attracts a lot of the public.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the plans.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Great. Any other commissioners, additional items? Okay, staff.
Okay, nothing huge to report right now, but you might have seen an email that I sent out this morning inviting you all to the training coming up in April. This is the Speed of Trust training that we talked about in the retreat. So you're all invited. Let me know, hopefully by next Monday. We're holding slots for everybody, and I encourage everybody to do it. It's super useful. So that's out there. Looking at the council agenda, just wanted to note, project for public spaces is coming back, I believe, on February 15th, so that'd be next Wednesday. Other than that, nothing tremendously relevant. This Wednesday, downtown and neighborhoods, there will be a conversation around that. Wayfinding next week. Yep. That's it.
Okay, great. So now we have two people in the public sitting there that might have some contribution. How are we doing? No? Okay. Thumbs up from one of you. Well, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 3, work session, capital improvement program. Mike Streepy, and if you could do me a favor, is just if you could outline at the beginning or at least at the end of your description, what do you want from the Planning Commission today? Ideally, how do you want us to support you today?
So my understanding of the process, we're going to take this to the Budget Committee on February 15th, and then it goes to Council for adoption. Historically, we have presented it to the Planning Commission prior to going to the Budget Committee. So I don't know that we're necessarily expecting anything. It's just sort of a way to show the Planning Commission this we're going to take to the Budget Committee, and these are the items that are be up for basically approval as part of the plan, and will become part of the capital budget for appropriation.
Great.
So
Okay,
basic
thank you.
feedback, ideas, but nothing in particular.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Alright. Okay. Well, with that, I will get started.
Do quick introductions.
Yeah. So I'm Mike Streepy. I'm an analyst in the finance division. I've been the lead staff on putting together the capital improvement program. And also with me today, they're going to help present. I have Mark Schoening, the city engineer down there, and Steve Logis, the design and construction section manager for facilities. I don't know if we have a clicker or not. So I'm going to start out talking about the CIP, the goals, what the document is, how it's developed, and then I'll delve a little bit into some high-level summaries of everything. And then Mark will go through the individual program areas in Public Works, and Steve will talk about the public buildings and facilities. First, the CIP is a complete compilation of planned capital projects or capital programs as well for the next 6 fiscal years. It's designed to be balanced. We tailor the planned improvements across program areas such as transportation, airport, wastewater, stormwater. The basis for the capital projects in the CIP is also then balanced by those planning processes that go into those various program areas. This could be master planning, inputs from various stakeholders, maintenance and monitoring programs, as well as the funding sources and funding restrictions. Another goal of the CIP is to align the city's projected capital needs with anticipated funding levels on an annual basis over the 6-year planning period. And then finally, the projects that are funded in the first 2 years of the CIP, that serves as the basis for the capital budget for those fiscal years. So for this CIP, the projects in FY18, FY19 will serve as the capital budget in FY18, FY19. The development of capital projects happens in a myriad number of ways. This graphic shows some of those different paths that a project can become part of the CIP. Prior plans and studies such as the airport master plan, the trans plan, the PROS plan, maintenance monitoring programs such as the facility condition report, or the city's wastewater monitoring program. We have infrastructure improvement or replacement programs such as the pavement management plan. Other things like external mandates, grant funding opportunities. For example, in stormwater, there's a decommissioning project going on right now that's part of an Oregon DEQ mandate. We also then have public and private entity requests. Those projects that come from that arena also make their way into the CIP. For this time, there's an airport car wash facility, for example, that was requested by the rental car companies that will be paid for by fees that the rental car companies pay. And finally, then specific council direction on capital projects, such as the permanent farmers market and the downtown park blocks improvements, which were incorporated into the downtown URA plan amendment. This is a basic framework for how the capital project goes from idea to the construction and use. Once the need is identified, which may be through something like a master planning process, not necessarily, then more detailed and specific project plans can begin to take shape to align funding options and funding availability with the planned project. The compilation of all these projects and the ongoing capital improvement programs that the city has then will basically comprise the city's CIP. The CIP is published. The public has opportunities to give feedback to council and the budget committee. The budget committee then will make a recommendation to move the CIP to council, and then council will ultimately approve the CIP. Once council approves the CIP, capital projects still have to go through the budget process. So in order to receive appropriation authority, this will happen as part of the city manager's proposed budget. And then once the appropriations are made, a whole range of project planning implementation activities can then occur, including more specific engineering and design work, project timelines, procurement and contracting, in coordination with partner agencies, inspection, etc. Here we see the timeline for this CIP. The draft of the CIP happens every other year. Staff compile a document throughout the fall and early winter. The draft document was published and distributed in late January. We did some public outreach. We put an announcement in the council newsletter and neighborhood newsletters so that citizens can be informed of the document and provide input to the budget committee and city council. The budget committee will then discuss the CIP in mid-February, and council will hold a public hearing again and adopt the CIP in mid-March. Once the CIP is adopted in March, the projects shown in the first year then become the basis of the city manager's proposed budget, which we'll have in April. This CIP has a number of changes to the document based on budget committee feedback and feedback from stakeholders. The most significant change that you'll see is that projects without secured or identified funding, so those projects that are considered unfunded, have been removed from the document to streamline budget committee discussion and council input. Previously, unfunded items appeared in multiple financial documents, including the multi-year financial plan. This at times appeared to be duplicative and led to some confusion amongst people on the budget committee. The CIP also includes more information in every program area on the project selection criteria. This is the information or the decision guides that staff use to prioritize projects, whether that may be master planning or safety concerns or facility condition monitoring. We've added some more narrative on these factors that help staff decide which of those projects in each program area rise to the top of the list. And then finally, each program area now has a project status update table. This is to provide more information and transparency on previously funded projects to help council and the public see where progress has been made and what work still needs to be done. These tables also provide more details on the projects for ongoing capital improvement programs, things like building service systems or the parks and open space site renovations. Yep.
During the 2-year draft cycle, every other year that it's presented, can changes be made to the SIP by the city council?
Yes. Yep. Any change that happens through the budget process is considered an amendment of the CIP. Particularly in that second year, new information will come to light to departments that they didn't have when they submitted projects, and so they can reconcile the CIP to what they're proposing as part of the capital budget. So, all right, let's take a look at the financial breakdown of the CIP, this CIP by program area. The chart you see here represents the total CIP spending for the next six fiscal years is projected to be $162 million, which is roughly around $30 million a year, which is what our capital budget typically is. Transportation is the largest component, nearly $54 million. Buildings and facilities at $32 million, followed by parks and open space, wastewater, the airport, and stormwater. These, as you can see, this brightly colored pie chart here has a lot of different funding sources. The CIP does have a lot of variety in the funding sources. The vast majority of these sources are restricted for a particular use by local, federal, or state law. For example, the Federal Aviation Administration funds, FAA funds, can only be used for airport projects, or the city's wastewater fees, which are on your monthly e-web bills, are restricted for use by the city's sewer system. Because of the restrictions associated with most of the capital funding sources, there's no across-the-board prioritization of CIP projects. Instead, projects are prioritized within each program area as allowable by the funding sources and the various factors that I mentioned in terms of master planning process, maintenance monitoring programs. The exception to this is the funding from the general fund, which is primarily used for none other than the general capital projects. General fund, general capital projects. These are projects for primarily public buildings and facilities that don't qualify for use of designated funds. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark now to provide an update on the public works projects in the CIP.
Okay, thank you. Can you work the slides for me? Or,
I think
Okay.
that should work, but
Okay.
if not, I'll
Which button do you push?
so which one do I push?
the arrow maybe, see if that works.
Up arrow.
Mouse works.
Otherwise, you can just use the enter
You can
key.
use the mouse.
I can,
Yeah,
yep,
the mouse
that might work.
Use the mouse
The
too.
Bluetooth
Okay.
works from down there. Yep.
So I'm not going to do this each time, right?
Roll.
You just use the roller, Mark.
In the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, just,
Just roll to the next one.
Yep. There you go.
oh, this is going to be, I got big hands. This is going to be tricky. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go over the public works portion of the capital improvement plan, which is airport, parks, and open space, stormwater, transportation, and wastewater. And this is a slide that we show each time we update the CIP, and it's the emplanements at the airport and the growth since the recession, where we took a big dive in after 2008, 2009, and then have grown each year since then. And our revenue enplanement is a paying passenger leaving the airport, and that's how the airport tracks growth at the airport. And a lot of it is there's additional people traveling for business or leisure, and we're also capturing more of our passengers in our what would be defined as our catchment area. They're not as many people are going to Portland, PDX, and as in the past. They're flying out of Eugene because it's becoming more cost effective as air service, the number of flights and the locations increases. So the projects for the airport are outlined and structured by the airport's master plan and then a 5-year federal aviation capital improvement plan. And these plan for the orderly development of the airport and facilities, and they're vetted through an airport advisory committee. This was a project that was just completed, the expansion of the terminal, which included new hold rooms, baggage claim area, and improved screening. And it's an airport-funded project, but facilities had a big role in this project as well, helping our facilities division in the management of that project. Oops. This is an overlay or an aerial of the airport, and in the first 3 years of the 6-year CIP, there's numerous projects including functional and safety improvements, which include access control upgrades, airfield geometry corrections, mitigation of open water to prevent, and that's primarily preventing hits by birds. A lot of it is, as Mike mentioned, there's the new car wash facility desired by the rental car companies. We've got a lot of pavement preservation of existing taxiway and runways. And then we've also got a jet bridge being replaced at the end of, which is at the end of its useful life. There's significant capital improvements planned for the last 3 years of the six-year CIP in the airport master plan and the FAA plan. However, they're not shown in our 6-year CIP for the reasons Mike said, because the funding isn't secured or guaranteed. But the intent is that as those years roll forward, we'll see those projects come forward as well. And then this kind of outlines in more detail the funding for the airport, with the majority of the funding coming from the Federal Aviation Administration, passenger facility charges, and customer facility charges. And the FAA funds are both discretionary and entitlement, so each airport is entitled to a certain amount of funding, and then there's some discretionary that goes through a more competitive process. And all of the federal funds are dependent upon congressional legislation and appropriation at the federal level. For parks and open space, this is one of the major areas is acquisition of new parklands. So this is the future Santa Clara Community Park, and we've acquired 35 acres so far with the goal to acquire 20 more acres. And a lot of the acquisition is looking for opportunities, willing sellers, and also developing we've got some long-term relationships with large property owners, for example, along the ridgeline, where it's been years and years of negotiations, and then just the timing is right. So property acquisition can be a long, involved process. And then a major component of the park's capital budget is renovation of existing projects or parks. So this is the third phase of a lighting improvements in Skinner Butte Park, which is scheduled for this coming summer. And lighting improvements are needed throughout the entire park system, Alton Baker, Maury Jacobs, and many neighborhood parks. And lighting is important to parks because of safety and security concerns. And this is particularly true along the Willamette River and the Fern Ridge Paths. And other renovation projects include turf rehabilitation, fixing of irrigation systems, parking lot paving, and that sort of thing. And then there's new park projects. So it's been 7 years since we've constructed a new park in Eugene, even though we have 17 undeveloped park sites that have been acquired for neighborhood and community parks in underserved areas. And it's primarily because we don't have we're millions of dollars behind in annual operation and maintenance. So we're not building new parks with the idea that once we resolve the funding of operation and maintenance of the existing park system, then we'll start to bring new capital projects online. So even though there's funding identified for new parks in the capital improvement plan, the idea is not to bring new assets on until we can fully fund and take care of the assets that we already have. And so here you can see the majority of the funding of parks is through system development charges. We have a good share of funding through the Urban Renewal Agency, and this is primarily the downtown projects around the park blocks. And then the parks, the SDCs have two components. There's the improvement fee, which is to build capacity in the park system, and then the reimbursement fee, which is focused on rehabilitation of the existing park system. So the rehabilitation fee can be spent on any park-related improvements, so it's really focused. We're using those funds to focus on rehabilitation. So, for example, the lighting improvements that I mentioned earlier. Kind of moving on to stormwater. One of our programs areas is rehabilitation of the existing stormwater system. So this is just an example of a pipe system being repaired or replaced. See if I get this. We've also, in a lot of our paving projects, we're looking at opportunities to treat the stormwater that runs off of the street system. So with the paving project, this I think this was this is 29th and Amazon. I think the paving project was on 29th. We built in this water quality facility to capture the runoff from the street system and treat it through green infrastructure prior to it discharging to the stormwater system. And then another program area is our dry well elimination program. So dry wells is kind of a generic term used to describe facilities that infiltrate stormwater directly into the ground without any type of treatment. And to protect groundwater quality, it's a program regulated under the Clean Drinking Water Act through the Department of Environmental Quality for us to eliminate our dry well system throughout our public dry well system. So that includes building the pipe system on the right to connect areas, and a lot of this is in River Road, Santa Clara area. There's some scattered through other parts of town, but a lot of it's in River Road, Santa Clara. So it's to connect areas to the existing pipe system, but also to treat that stormwater before it enters the pipe system. So we have a combination of the hard pipe infrastructure on the right and then the water quality facilities on the left. Another program area we're focused on, and if you were on saw the CIP presentation a couple years ago, the project on the right is Amazon Creek downstream of Chambers, where we widened the channel, created a larger floodplain, and then armored some of the channel and put in check dams to slow the flow down and created more habitat. And so that's our goal with the area on the left. If you recognize that, this is the concrete section that in the vicinity of South Eugene High School and Civic Stadium. So the opportunity, because we've got the property available, is between 24th and just upstream of 19th, upstream of the First Place Family Center, is to remove the concrete channel and put it back in its natural state for both, to try to capture all of the benefits of the channel, not just the flood control, but the wildlife habitat and the water quality aspects of a natural channel. The stormwater funding is primarily stormwater user fees that you see on your city utility bill, along with wastewater user fees. And then some portion of that is also stormwater SDCs. And as I mentioned in the slides, the focus of the program is really rehabilitation of the existing system, rehabilitation and restoration of Amazon Creek, and then dealing with the dry wells or infiltration facilities that we have throughout the community. The next area I'm going to talk about is transportation. So one of our funding sources is our local gas tax, which is 5 cents a gallon, and it generates about $3 million a year in capital funding, and it's all dedicated to pavement preservation. So this is Harold Street, which was rehabilitated along with Davis in Alva Park, which is north of Elmira out in the Bethel area. And so in this case, part of our pavement preservation program, we try, with the council's climate recovery ordinance and the focus on sustainability, we try to incorporate that into all of our capital projects. So in this case, the existing pavement was milled off, but then kept in place, and then that became part of the base of the road, and then we paved over it. So almost 100% of the existing pavement was retained in place. So it reduced the number of truck trips of hauling that material away. And we used over 35% of the old pavement. When it's milled, it still has the oil in it. And there's an opportunity to capture that oil and reduce the amount of virgin oil that's put into asphalt. So in this case, we're able to recover 35%, or 35% of the oil in the mix was from recycled asphalt. The industry standards in what ODOT uses is about 30%, and we've experimented on a couple of projects with 35 and as high as 40%. It gets a little trickier with recycled asphalt because it creates a stiffer, more brittle mix, so you've got to there's different softnesses of the oil, so you've got a, it's a balancing act to be able to use recycled asphalt and still have a strong, durable, long-lasting pavement. This is another program area that's funded out of the pavement preservation is the bond measure that was passed in 2012. So this is Fairfields and Jacobs Drive. And this is another process we use that kind of moves forward with the city's sustainability goals in that it's called in-place cement-treated base. So the existing asphalt is ground up and removed, and then that's taken away, and that can be recycled into pavements. And then the base course, the rock and some of the subgrade is essentially rototilled with a cement slurry, and then that forms the new base to be paved on. So instead of having to pull all, the 8 to 12 inches of rock base that have failed and disposing of that and then bringing in virgin material, it's treated in place to create a new base. So we don't carry all that material away. We use it in place, and then we get a much stronger pavement structure because of that. Gosh, kind of. And then as part of the bond measure, there was $500,000 allocated annually to bike and ped projects. So this is an example of two of those. The one on the left is a sidewalk infill project on Good Pasture Island Road. So it's remember the new bridge that was built a couple years ago? It extended the sidewalk as far as we could require the developer as part of his development project, but it still left a gap in the sidewalk. So that gap was filled with this sidewalk infill project. And then on the right is rapid or RRFB on River Road. And so these projects within the capital improvement program, or this portion of the bond measure, is that these projects are vetted through our active transportation committee. So it's we use our bicycle pedestrian master plan, city staff, and that committee to kind of prioritize the projects across the city. And finally, this shows the funding stream for projects. A lot of it is dedicated to pavement preservation, the bond measure, and the local gas tax. We also include some stormwater and wastewater, and this is primarily to repair stormwater and wastewater systems prior to paving projects. And we do that same coordination not only with our own utilities, but with EWEB and Northwest Natural. Is that we're typically 3 to 4 years out in scheduling our paving projects, so that gives Northwest Natural and EWEB and our own city staff time to identify and rehabilitate any subsurface utilities before we come in with a paving project. The federal funds we have a lot of those are for bike and ped projects. So we have 3 large bike and ped projects in the CIP. One is the 13th Avenue cycle track from the U of O to downtown. We've got a project on Roosevelt Boulevard to create a shared use path to connect Roosevelt Boulevard to the project on Highway 99, the new ped bike bridge. And then we've got reconstruction of the path through the EWEB property, and that's going to be incorporated into the new park on the EWEB property. Once that property transaction occurs with EWEB, we'll move forward with that. And then a recent program through with federal funds through ODOT is the All Roads Transportation. Let's see, I'll make sure I'll get this right. The All Roads Transportation Safety Program. And so we're going to do safety improvements at 3 intersections on that. It's Martin Luther King at Kinsrow, River Road at Irvington, and River Road at River Avenue. So that those are 3 safety projects that are funded through ODOT with federal funds. And that's part of, safety is part of all of our projects. It's a consideration in all our projects, but it's been more focused with the council's adoption of Vision Zero, which with the goal of having no serious injuries or fatalities on the city's transportation system. So, Vision Zero and sustainability and complete streets are all names for things that have been incorporated into our projects for years and years. Safety has always been part of our program, but Vision Zero and the adoption of that resolution by the City Council just puts more focus on that, but it's been an important part of our programs. And then finally, I'm going to talk about wastewater. And a lot of the wastewater program is focused on rehabilitation of the existing system. And so this is a photo of relining of an existing pipe. So what's laid out on the ground is a liner pipe. It's essentially a new pipe, and it's pulled through a fiberglass pipe that's pulled through the existing pipe after the existing pipe has been cleaned. It's impregnated with resin, and then hot water is circulated with that. And what you have on the right, if you can tell, is that's a brand new pipe inside the old pipe. And so it eliminates any cracks or repairs cracks and fractures in the old pipe, which is a source of infiltration of groundwater, which ends up at the treatment plant and is treated. So the idea is to reduce the amount of infiltration into the system so that we recapture some of the capacity, not only of the pipe system, but at the wastewater treatment plant. One of our major projects, rehabilitation projects, is the West Irwin Pump Station, which is the city's second largest pump station. Built in 1964. It's seismically vulnerable, and also it's the wet well and the dry well, which are beneath the pump station, provide a hazardous work environment and risk to employees in the event of if they're working in those areas and there's a power outage or the pumps fails, those underground areas, the wells, could be flooded. So we're addressing both the safety and the age of the pump station and the seismic vulnerability of it. And this shows the funding is primarily from the wastewater utility, your monthly utility charge, and the sanitary sewer wastewater SDC, and the majority of that is the reimbursement fee of that system. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve to do that.
Can we ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
There are two things, like you had mentioned for, let's say, transportation, the 2012 bond issue. It goes through this SIP. Does it end at that SIP? Will there be a balance, or in the funding for that, or a new bond issue have to go out?
A new bond issue will have to go out. So it's we have funding this year or next year will be the last 2 years of that bond measure. The goal is to so as part of that bond measure, we have a street repair review panel that the bond requires us to establish to review the spending to make sure we spent it right. But in 2012, that panel also developed a structure of the bond measure that went out in 2012. So the idea is, and that panel is convening right now, is we'll get through the review of this year's projects. We'll take that to the council sometime in March, and at the same time ask the council to direct us to start preparing for a bond measure in the fall of 2017. Then we'll reconvene that panel to work through the structure of a bond measure for 2017.
And will parks have to be doing the same thing with their bond? It's sort of running out their funds for...
Yeah, it's a little bit different, and they don't... They would have to go to the council to get the council to approve putting something on the ballot, and then, but they don't have that same type of panel that has been set up for the pavement preservation program.
One last question. Under wastewater, there's some SDC funds in there, and you indicated wastewater is primarily rehabilitation.
Right.
I was under the impression, and it probably is wrong, that SDC funds were for expansion and growth and not necessarily rehabilitation.
Well, there's two components. So there's the improvement fee, and there's the reimbursement fee. So the improvement fee of the STC can only be spent on capacity improvements. The reimbursement component can be spent on any wastewater-related capital infrastructure. It all has to be spent on capital. And depending on the methodology for wastewater, for example, I believe 84% of the STC is the reimbursement fee, and the remaining 16% is the improvement fee. So the majority of it is in the reimbursement fee, which is then we focus that on the rehab.
So will that be staying the same when you're redoing the STC? You said you were redoing the formulas?
No, I think it'll. I think for each of them it changes over time. Yeah.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I just had a quick question too. I think it's on the airport funding, there's a category called airport construction. Is that just previously bonds that were passed?
Which page is?
Page 6. I mean, all the other categories I understood, but I just was curious if that's some previous bonds that you're getting.
No, there's no.
The bonding on the airport.
Oh, no bonding? Okay.
There's no bonding. It's the airport is
FAA.
pay as you go. It's and it's all with the airport fund. So I think that that could be. I can't find my page 6 easily.
I think it's a reference to the airport construction fund,
Oh,
which
okay.
may be different than the source, but I'd have to check.
Yeah, it's just, I didn't quite understand what it was.
Yeah, they do have a. Airport construction at $2 million. I think that what the airport does, because I think that's shown in one of their. They annually they budgeted amount, and 2.2 sounds like the summation of the 6 years. Is they don't have specific projects, but they're small projects that periodically arise around the airport. So it might be a section of sidewalk that needs to be replaced, or a parking lot that needs to be rehabilitated that they didn't identify. It's a small project and they didn't specifically identify it. Mm-hmm. But it's probably from passenger facility charges, which have more
Okay.
ability to do those type of small projects.
And then I just wanted to mention, it's really more of a suggestion, because, I've been trying to get EWIP to underground power lines for years and years and years, particularly after that big tower came. Well, John is well aware of what we're talking about, the big tower coming down over in north of the river. And so the only thing I was going to suggest is whenever you might be digging, like for stormwater, I know you would be coordinating with utilities, but maybe send a special invitation for them to consider dropping some empty conduit in there when you dig, so we could, over time, we'd have the capability to underground more of the utilities and not have to pay such a high price whenever we have an ice storm and, 25,000 people without electricity for extended period of time, That's just a suggestion. It has nothing to do with the funding, but I just wanted to mention because you had an opportunity here and you talked about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Logis. I'm the Facilities Design and Construction Manager, and I'll be telling you today about our public buildings and related capital projects that the Facility Management Division is responsible for. The city maintains a wide range of public facilities, including neighborhood, community, and metropolitan parks, community centers, swimming pools, fire stations, government office buildings, parking structures, and the library. In all, the city maintains and preserves 185 buildings totaling over 2 million square feet. The city also provides new and/or expanding facilities to meet the needs of the growing community. The general fund is the primary source of funding for public buildings and facility preservation and improvement projects. Public buildings and facility projects are derived from several adopted plans and facility condition reports. These include the PRO's Comprehensive Plan, Urban Renewal Plans, the Facility Condition Report, Downtown City Plan, Public Works Facility Master Plan Update, Americans with Disability Transition Plan, HUD Consolidated Plan, and Parking Structures Condition Analysis. Capital improvement dollars for general fund public facilities are allocated through the following project categories. The first category is facility preservation and maintenance. These projects preserve, maintain, and repair systems allocated or associated with existing facilities. The category is divided into 4 preservation and maintenance programs: health, safety, and welfare projects, primary building systems, secondary building systems, and building service systems. The second category is site and facility improvements. Projects in this category include modifications and/or additions to existing facilities to meet operational safety and cost efficiency goals and to comply with the ADA. The primary goal of this program is to address changing program functions and needs and/or to improve service delivery. These types of projects have limited impact on facility operating costs, as their purpose is to upgrade or reconfigure space for more effective service delivery. This category is organized into 2 program areas: the general site and facility improvements and ADA renovations. Excuse me. The last category is new capital facilities. Projects in this category typically provide for either new and/or replacement facilities, or are projects that expand existing facilities and services and are of such a scale to warrant a classification as standalone projects. Large-scale facility changes that are needed to provide for community growth are found in this category of projects. See if I can work this. Oh, there we go. Here's a recent example of a roof replacement project for the Central Lane 911 Communications Center. This is classified as a primary building system project. Although the facility is only 15 years old, the roofing system began failing sooner than anticipated. The total project cost was roughly $110,000. Whoops. Here's another project in the same category. The existing lobby for Sheldon Pool was out of date and functionally obsolete. The project included a new service counter, flooring, and an improved entryway into the space to help with accessibility and energy efficiency. Over the last several years, Facilities has actively supported the Recreation, Parks and Open Space Systems Plan effort through master planning assistance and work on their project teams. As you may have noticed in the CIP document, many recreation facilities are in need of major renovations and improvements. This is largely due to the fact that almost all of these facilities were built in the 1960s and are now over 50 years old. The facilities are not only in need of major repairs, but are also not as functionally adapted as they once were when they were first built. Whoops. Got to have a light touch for this. The capital budget is also used for historic renovation projects. Some of the facilities we have recently worked on include the McNail Riley House pictured here. At the McNail Riley House, we put on a new cedar shingle roof and refinished the wood floors. The Shelton McMurphy Johnson House had a window restoration project done on it. In the Morse Family Farm, we remodeled the entryway and a bathroom. Let's see, okay, got to get off of there, excuse me. In coordination with our purchasing office, Facilities has met with multiple public agencies in Salem and in Portland, including TriMet, the Governor's Office, Portland Public Schools, Port of Portland, City of Portland, and Multnomah County to learn about their MWDBE outreach strategies. Some of the equity and contracting strategies we are implementing include tracking participation through solicitation documents, utilizing databases such as the city's own e-bid system and the state's co-bid database, and by participating in open houses and reverse trade shows. Thank you. The capital budget helps support climate recovery ordinance initiatives and energy efficiency projects. Examples include the Hilliard Center LED lighting retrofit, retro commissioning projects at the Holt Center, Library, and Police Headquarters, and working with consultants to identify energy efficiency projects and with the goal of reducing carbon footprint and use of fossil fuels. 7 initial facilities are slated for study, which include a broad range of building types. Strategies can be applied to other buildings of similar use, including fire stations. Elevators in our parking garages in the library are problematic and require major renovation and modernizations. Most of the lifts in our garages are decades old and are routinely vandalized. Due to budgetary constraints, the library elevators were value engineered during construction and replaced with less expensive models, which of course have proven to be less reliable, especially because they receive heavy use by patrons and staff. We are actively working with parking services to modernize parking garage elevators and have a project underway to upgrade elevators at the library. As you can see, newer buildings such as the library are beginning to age and require a significant investment to keep operating efficiently. The Holt Center is another example. It's now almost 35 years old and major systems are coming due for replacement. A few years ago, facilities managed a project to retrofit and refurbish skylights and glazing systems at the Holt Center to prevent water leaks. The Facility Management Division utilizes a condition assessment tool to help proactively identify building systems that are at the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. This information, along with feedback from the O&M team and our departments, help inform our project priorities and how to allocate funding. The graph in this slide represents future funding needs for capital projects at the Holt Center over the next 20 years. The CIP includes $32 million for the city's buildings and facilities. The major projects are funded with general capital project dollars. $4.5 million from Urban Renewal Agency funds have also been identified for an improved farmers market, which was part of the downtown URA plan amendments made by council. This slide illustrates the capital preservation funding gap. Our current funding level is below the recommended 2% of the current replacement value. Manageable now, but not sustainable in the future. We're already seeing the impact of O&M costs. Buildings are requiring more day-to-day maintenance. Moving out of older facilities and into newer ones, newer and more efficient buildings has helped with this funding gap. The estimated cost of existing deficiencies is $31 million, and the overall FCI has increased to 0.1, based on a total current replacement value of $310 million for all general fund buildings. The methodology is based on a predictive model of building condition assessment rather than an actual visual on-site inspection, which is more efficient and results in more accurate assessment of facility condition. When combined with major maintenance provided through the Facility Management Division's operating budget, resources dedicated to the general fund facility preservation and maintenance equal approximately 1.7% of the value of the inventory of general fund buildings. This is below the lower limit of the range of 2 to 4% of asset value recommended by the National Research Council for the Maintenance and Repair of Publicly Owned Buildings.
Thanks, Steve. I was feeling good up until that.
Until the gap.
Yeah.
Optimistic news. So, just to recap, FY 18 to 23 CIP represents $162 million in capital projects for the next 6 fiscal years. There's 62 capital projects or ongoing capital programs. This CIP really does look to align the city's capital needs with the projected available funding that we'll have. In addition to what you've heard today, there's a lot more information in the CIP. There's individual project-specific descriptions. There's project maps by program area and by neighborhood. Again, the next steps in the CIP will be a public hearing and budget committee discussion on February 15th, followed by the public hearing and council adoption on March 13th. That's all we have for you guys today.
Well, thank you very much for the overview, and we'll take questions. I have Commissioner Borofsky, Randall, Baker, and then Nicolello.
All right, I have several questions.
Can you do me a favor? How about 3, and then we'll move it around, make sure we have enough time.
Yep.
Thank you.
So for Steve, the facility condition report was last done in 2010, and it showed a 1.5% deficiency. You just stated that you think it's gone up to 1.7, but it's still below the 2 to 4%. When do you think that you'll do a new condition facility report?
We are actively soliciting, new contract to establish them to come out and do a new facility condition report. That will probably be initiated in the next 2 or 3 months. So we will have more current information
And then
this next year.
to follow up on that, in the last few years, part of the $900,000 transfer at SB1 has been moved off to help fund City Hall. How would you say that is affecting the other facilities that 500,000 plus that has been coming out of general fund money has gone to the new building transfer? How would you say that's affecting the city's facilities as a whole?
I'd say predictably enough, it's not helping our gap there. If we had that extra dollar, I understand the City Hall needs the funding. But in terms of our efforts to try to preserve and maintain the buildings that we have now, it definitely hurts it. We're trying to stretch it all we can, but definitely a negative impact.
And then one more question. This goes to the transportation side. One of the projects in the CIP is for traffic calming. It's an ongoing one for $30,000 a year. In the upcoming transportation, the new trans plan that's been put out and we've reviewed, there's an item to increase that to $100,000 per year. How will that get incorporated into the CIP if that trans plan or transportation, what's it called, the plan? TSP if that gets enacted by the city council, how will that get reflected into the CIP for next year?
That's a good question, because, for the timing is off for this year because
It hasn't been adopted yet.
Right, it hasn't been adopted yet. I think the idea would be we would let the council know that one of the, I believe it's a proposed action item, it's not that supports one of the policies, that's a proposed action item to consider for additional funding.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. It's not you've got the one written going forward for the next 6 years at $30,000 a year. I just want to make sure that gets into amended. If there's an amended plan and that each of these are budgeted, they don't actually get implemented until the budget gets done. But I want to put that up for a flag, and then I'll take a second round after the other people.
Commissioner Randall?
First, I have 2 questions. First question, under public buildings and facilities, there are 2 categories, primary building systems and building service systems. Can you kind of explain to me the difference between those 2?
Primary building systems we usually look at as like the building envelope. If the roof is, the obvious one is the roofing
windows,
leaking, windows, siding systems, infiltration, and trying to preserve that building envelope. Second, or the service would be more like electrical systems, HVAC systems, more the mechanical, electrical service portions of the building.
Great, thank you.
Lighting.
Second question then is parks maintenance. Where does that come from? I know it's not in the CIP, but
Right.
where does that come from in the budget?
Comes from both the general fund and the stormwater fund.
Okay.
Primarily, I think that's probably 99%
So
of
that's
it.
why when we have money here for new parks, we aren't doing new parks until we have money to actually maintain what we have.
So the general fund is mostly for the developed parks, and the stormwater is more than natural areas. If there's a nexus between the, like street trees, I think are a lot of that's funded out of stormwater because there's a nexus between the street canopy and the stormwater system.
Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I was just wondering it's more about the horizons. The CIP uses 6 years, Planning Department uses 5 years, the Parks Department, has there ever been any discussion of trying to get them all in 6, maybe they start, I mean, if you're mandated by federal agencies like the FAA for a different schedule, then that would be a reason, but it would maybe make sense to sort of try to align them a little bit so they flow together a little bit. That's just a thought. I don't know if you can let me know if that's feasible at all or not.
I don't think there's a mandate that it'd be 5 or 6 years for our CIP. I think, and I don't know the history of it, I assume it's because we look at the first 2 years as rolling into the capital budget and the last 4 years as more of a planning horizon, and then updated every 2 years. But and you're right about FAA that they tell us that it's going to be a 5-year plan.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Nicolello.
Thanks. I don't have a microphone, so I'll talk a little bit louder. So my question is actually a little bit related to Commissioner Broski's question. Thanks, Commissioner Randall. So first question, really quickly, where do sidewalks fall in under funding? I don't think they're part of the pavement preservation fund. If I'm correct, they would fall under that $500,000 for.
All right, so the example I gave was the sidewalk on Good Pasture Island Road. That was funded out of the $500,000 in the pavement bond measure that's dedicated to bikes and peds. Sidewalks are for new development, developers, or new building permits, developers pay for those. For street improvement projects, sidewalks are assessed to the abutting property owner. There's no program or fund for the city to fund sidewalks outside of that, other than that portion of the bond measure.
So my question is really just kind of going to use more of a discussion item. So there doesn't seem to be many funding mechanisms for sidewalks, and then in terms of bike and bus projects, $500,000 doesn't really match the mode shared goals. As Commissioner Broski mentioned, that we just recommended to the TSP, and I know that, you know, obviously it can't apply to this year for CIP, but just thinking in terms of future years. Active transportation funding faces a lot of constraints in Oregon. You know, we have constitutional boundaries for gas tax. We have iffy federal funding perhaps for the next few years. And then also too, you know, our transportation bond measure running out, though hopefully a renewal is in our future. And so our network for bikes, pedestrians, and sidewalks is still relatively incomplete. And I know it can look like it is complete sometimes, but if you're trying to get from, you know, here out towards even Trader Joe's, it can be a little bit of a fun bicycle ride. So considering the adoption of Vision Zero and our climate recovery ordinance and our new mode share goals for the TSP, what are some of the discussions going on right now in order to really help bolster our funding for active transportation and to make sure that we are meeting those priorities through how our funding is allocated?
Well, first let me say that, as I mentioned, that there's 3 major bike ped projects: 13th, Roosevelt, and reconstruction of the E-Web path. And I don't, the numbers are in there, but that's in multi-millions of dollars. That's going forward. Plus the federal funds for safety projects that are focused on bike and ped at those signalized intersections. In addition, we've got projects that are queued up, so that are going to be constructed over the next 2 summers: the Northeast Livable Streets, which is a bike ped project, the Amazon Corridor, which is a bike ped project, and then the Jessen Pass. So we've got projects, and those are all in the $1 million each. So there is quite a bit of funding that's, I mean, our capital budget is focused on preservation of the existing system, primarily pavements, and bike and ped. Those are really the two components. The one new funding source that is going to come to the Eugene area is the congestion mitigation air quality federal funds. So those in the past have been focused on the Portland area and I think Medford in those council of government areas or MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations. And the Eugene Springfield area was just granted some of those funds. So that's going to be a major source of funds, and they're going to be focused on projects that mitigate congestion and air quality, and a lot of those are going to be bike ped. So that's going to be a major source of federal funding. So I think we're doing a pretty good job of funding a lot of bike ped projects now, particularly when the transportation projects overall are focused on preservation, and there's optimism that there's new projects that'll focus on bike ped projects, or new funding sources that'll focus on bike ped projects. And the council's got a work session coming up to talk about unimproved roads and new development, because a lot of new development occurs and the infrastructure doesn't always come with it, but the demand for that infrastructure is there as well.
Okay, I have two other, at this point, Commissioner Borowski and then Commissioner Baker.
Thank you. So I just have to bring this up because I brought it up in 2009 and I've got to bring it up again today. At the airport, there is a project in the CIP for the new automated car wash. New automated car wash, it's paid for by user fees that the rental car companies imposed this fee on us to build us a new car wash. In 2009, they allocated almost $1.9 million to build this car wash. And at that point, I thought that was fairly extensive to build a car wash for rental cars. In this new CIP, the budget has increased to $4 million to make this car wash. To me, I think that is outrageous. I think that even though the fees are imposed on the rental car companies, those fees are being paid by consumers, and I just would like to see some sort of a breakdown at some point as to what a $4 million car wash facility is there for. To me, it's just boggles my mind, and I'll bring that up at the 15th meeting as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out a concept that because I noticed in one place there was a donation of $150 to one category, and it concerns lighting. I think that in some cases, the public might be willing to fund a project or partially fund it. And I'll give an example from my own experience. I've been volunteering with the Wow Hall. We just put up 2 lights there, and half of the money was donated by the community to pay for those, that. And I'll throw out an example. Along the bike path between 18th and 24th, it's very dark, and it's a very heavily used path. And I bet if you did some sort of a Kickstarter campaign, or if maybe Public Works could get together with the bicycle community and suggest it and get somebody to, you might actually get funding for putting in some low-level lights along the path. And that would be an example of another funding mechanism that then could be used when there is a popular, traffic calming would be another example. Where there are certain things that the public is so interested in, they're actually willing to tap their pocketbooks. Just a suggestion. So, but I think that's a potential given our funding shortfalls.
I'd be remiss in not bringing up the City of Eugene's Neighborhood Matching Grant Program. And actually, there were a few years with the exception of this year. This year, my understanding is that we actually have more applicants, more desired funding than we have allocation. It comes from the general funds, but it's actually it's a really robust program. Prior years, there was a kind of a gap of a few years that actually we were getting applications that were less than the amount of money that we had. We had more money to spend. So I personally, I'd love to actually increase the amount of money in those general funds, and it is this opportunity that Commissioner Baker is talking about. And like I said, it is an active, robust program. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
So we have the next agenda item. You guys you can stay sitting. Since we don't get to see you that often, it's great to have you sitting here. Thank you very much. So the next and last agenda item. Yeah, right. So I just want to announce it. So we're going to we'll just have a switch of staff and then I'll announce it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Is this not working?
Oh, no, I just move it up here. Thank you. Bill and I were sharing. Yeah.
That was easier than reaching over there to bring it.
Yeah, I was like,
Okay, you ready?
yeah.
Okay, agenda item number 4, South Willamette update, next steps, and staff members, Terry Hardy.
Yes, there's me, and there's also Jen Vanderhagen, and I'll let her introduce herself to you real quick.
Hi, I'm Jen Yettis Vanderhagen. I'm the manager of the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office.
So the two of us have been working together to come up to implement the council's direction on next steps for South Willamette, for planning in South Willamette. What was attached to your agenda item was the staff proposal that we sent to council on January 31st, which was a result of their motions that they made in October and again in November to do this. I do want to acknowledge there's been some recent emails that have come in requesting a delay in the timeline, and I've just gotten those, so I haven't had a chance to review all of them, but in concept, I have no problem with delaying whatever needs to be done to get on the right page for engagement. Seems like totally doable. I don't want there to be any feelings of anxiety about having to get something through to meet a council deadline. That's not the case. Our goal was to deliver a responsible proposal that both included the neighborhood community's goals for next steps and also supports citywide goals and values, particularly around the triple bottom line of sustainability. And so you may have noticed an item in the proposal called a triple bottom line sounding board. And that's a concept that staff from various work groups have been interested in for a little while to better connect the works of the different commissions and work groups around economic prosperity, social equity, and environmental responsibility. Anything else you want to add about the TBL sounding board?
We're excited about it just as an opportunity to bring more voices to the table on various projects. So it's not only in considering planning projects, but we've talked about using it for the climate recovery ordinance, different projects that the Human Rights Commission might take on, so that we're both using it in practice as staff members, but also encouraging our boards and commissions as they advance work to use a similar model.
Yeah. Just going to turn this off because it's kind of loud. Great. So one thing you'll also see in the staff proposal is that we reached out to the neighborhood boards, elected boards of Friendly, Southwest Hills, Southeast, and Amazon, which was spelled out in the motion. We, I think, met with Sheena twice, Fan 2 or 3 times, and once each with Southeast and Amazon. And those organizations proceeded to have their own meetings and take their own motions about various aspects of the work going forward. One thing that I think they've communicated directly with you all on and directly to the council is their motions about the boundary for the future plan. and they were all unanimous in that, and that was brought forward into the staff proposal that we sent out. And that boundary would focus mixed-use refinement plan on the commercially designated area from 24th to 29th. The other item that has been discussed up to this point is the composition of a planning team. And again, this is something that's been discussed a lot back and forth and has been acted upon by the neighborhood boards. And again, that was brought forward into the staff proposal, but has not gotten feedback from other stakeholders to this point. So part of our goal in delivering a draft proposal to the council and to the public is to get that broad kind of feedback on the elements that have been included. So next steps would be gathering all sorts of comments, developing a project budget. You all know, since you're the Planning Commission, that this isn't currently on the work plan for the planning staff. It's also not on the work plan for human rights and neighborhood involvement. And so we're intending to work with the stakeholders involved in the next steps to develop a project budget and then get explicit council approval and identify funding to move the project forward. That's the next step. I guess lastly, I would just say that while we have had a number of really productive meetings with neighborhood groups, we haven't yet really had a chance to involve property owners and business owners of this area, and the boundary is all commercial land. So I'm looking forward to that as a next step in the process to really get two-way conversations going and a productive conversation between interests that will be affected by this plan going forward. So for Planning Commission today, we're not looking for any sort of formal recommendation. It was more of a heads up to include you and loop you in to the communication that is going to the City Council. But we certainly would welcome any questions you have about this or ideas you have for strengthening our engagement. Anything else you would like?
I guess I'd just add that our offices have been working together where it made sense and collaborating along the way, but this explicit partnership is something that we're really looking forward to continuing and figuring out how to make work, in particular thinking about how the missions of each of our offices can support things like a plan that focuses on both getting all of the planning needs done and thinking really clearly about the community engagement and figuring out what kind of resources we can provide to neighborhoods directly to support folks in doing meaningful outreach.
So I'm going to put myself in the queue, and then I've got Commissioner Baker and Commissioner Jaworski. So I would love a little bit of an explanation. This really, for me, is an understanding, and some of it might be repetition. In understanding, so I'm looking at the map on the very last page, and the red boundary or orangish boundary is the area for the mixed-use area refinement plan that's been targeted. And then the green area is the area for the enhanced walkability and accessibility district. And you said that the neighborhood associations are consistent with this. Is that my understanding? Is this?
Right. They used this map in their discussions, but it was more about the second bullet under the green box says area from which planning team members are appointed.
Okay.
I think that is the part that made it into their motions as far as kind of where to draw the line.
Okay, so one of my questions, just from a triple bottom line, really, is if we're looking at the objective of a mixed-use area from a land use perspective that's citywide, that's really targeted in an area that already allows mixed use. So currently C2 already allows mixed use. So we've already gone through a planning process that was extensive and was costly. So what I'm looking out here is another study for an area that already allows mixed use in a commercial area, and it's my understanding that in the Envision Eugene, commercial was a deficit area of inventory, which have had a way that we've made that up through the E zones. But I actually just want to be careful how the next steps that we take. And I know we've been really focused on the neighborhood the community involvement process, and I understand re-looking at it where we are now. I do want to look at it from a triple bottom line perspective in terms of looking at the city overall. And is this really, at this point, what are our objectives? What are we trying to achieve right now? And what, in relation to those objectives, how does it compare to other neighborhoods or to other priority objectives in the city of Eugene? And I know there's a lot of focus on this area right now, and I'm not saying that we don't continue to have maybe even an informal process, but I really think it's important that we're responsible and take a look at this from that perspective, stepping back out.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so there were two, Commissioner Jaworski and then Baker and then Randall. Or did I mix it up? Would you rather Baker first?
No, you go first, it's fine.
You guys-
I've been speaking before, so y'all can go, and then I'll go last.
I like what you said about develop a focused refinement plan, not just the point that it's only in the red area, but I like focused on all refinement plans, and I like your outline that says you're going to take a look and work with the neighborhood on specific issues and problems rather than always doing these global refinement plans that take forever. So I kind of like that. I did have a question because I didn't quite understand, and I understand the red area is primarily in the business area, is when you look at the planning team and you say 3 to 5, and then you look at the residents and you say 3 to 5, 2 which much should be renters, that would mean on this refinement plan that, you know, if there are 10, that 5 are business, 2 are renters, and a couple might be residents, but it doesn't have to be that big. So I'm wondering why the emphasis so much? Why are only the neighborhoods getting ex officio? To me, that means they don't vote. Okay, so they're not voting on this, and I'm wondering, because if you look at all the yellow area, how is the red area going to handle transition zones and so whatever that'll impact them? So that's a big question that I have relative to that. Another quickie that I had was when you talk about on the, oh God, I didn't page it, but I guess the third page, deliverables, I wanted to know, are you going to use a lot of material that's already been developed? Because you developed excellent material for that area. So I don't think you should always come out with new deliverables. You should say, here's these deliverables that relate to that. How do you want to modify it? Rather than generating all pure new deliverables. So that's pretty much just a comment. I like the triple bottom line aspects as our chair identified. And one other thing that I had was, I guess on the second to the last page when you talk about, I'm going real quick here, identifying the problems. In the first part, you have 3 steps, and identifying the solutions, you have 4 steps, and I don't understand why step 4 is not in the upper part. You might want to explain that. And then when I look at step 3, it says that after we've done all of our reviews, the Planning Commission gives direction and team presents direction to City Council. Does that mean that the team presents our recommendations to the City Council, or do they present the team's recommendations to the City Council? Because otherwise our recommendations go nowhere when I read this. So that's a question I have. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I have, Commissioner Jaworski covered a number of the areas that I have concerns about. I wanted to suggest that that when we focus on the red areas, it seems to me for some reason we have an issue because we're not getting the mixed use that we want. And in fact, you know, I saw, you know, the bowling alley was knocked down some time ago, but now they took out a perfectly good building on the corner as well. And my understanding, the plans are they're going to build a 1-story structure back. So it seems like we should really try to focus to see what, you know, what areas we could improve or whatever to really make mixed use. If you want mixed use to happen, it's certainly not happening with the current plan, and we have a perfect example of, you know, of that. Normally you don't have to take a building down, but they had a fire there. So I really think that that's an area for concern. And also, I didn't quite understand how the triple bottom line was implemented. Is it a separate committee that looks at this, or each group makes certain that they include triple bottom line? Because depending on the project, there might be different levels of expertise needed than, a generic committee, for example.
Do you want a response to that one? Okay. I could do a quick one.
Sure.
It's envisioned as a resource group that could be used for different projects, as Jen mentioned, and also that it would primarily consist of already appointed bodies, such as the Human Rights Commission and Sustainability Commission, Planning Commission, perhaps Housing Policy Board, so that a new body isn't really created. It's just integration of the triple bottom line elements from existing groups to provide that resource and integrated thinking.
Well, if I could just follow, then I think you really should, I would suggest that you consider it sort of ad hoc depending on the project, because, for example, you might want the bicycle pedestrian folks there on some projects, but in others, they aren't really, depending on what it is, that would be an example, or public works because you're doing a lot of lighting, or EWEB because you're doing underground utilities. So, I think you should treat it more as an ad hoc where you have these groups of experts that then you can tap to form a committee that would review a particular project. That's a suggestion, but.
Okay, so in the first round, I have three, Commissioner Randall, Commissioner Mills, and Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. I understand the need to draw boundaries. I mean, you have to draw a line somewhere. And I think I understand the boundary at 24th, and I certainly understand the boundary at Amazon Parkway, but I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the boundary at 29th.
Yeah.
And I know 29th is a busy street. It's a little different than Amazon, I think, as far as just being able to cross over. But just from the standpoint of planning, it seems to me including at least some distance, and how far I don't know, but some distance south of 29th seems to make sense, because we're drawing this line down 29th. We have all the commercial directly across 29th at Willamette. We're only taking two of the, like at 29th and Willamette, we're only taking two of the four corners.
Right.
And that seems to me like that boundary should be expanded south at least a little bit, just to include that. I think it would be a better planning document to do that.
Thanks.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I'm going to make two quick points. One is to support the question that Commissioner Randall has just raised. In my work on this plan at some of the public exchanges, some of the people I talked to were very concerned, and I'm talking about people that live south of 29th and what was in the plan. So there was a lot of concern raised from the public to the plan by people living south of 29th, so I'm puzzled by the boundary leaving them out. The second thing is this is kind of maybe a little bit of a troublemaking question, Terry. I'm having a hard time imagining how this starts. I mean, I'm reading during this phase, the planning team will work with the community, I presume perhaps through a series of meetings, to develop a list of the most pressing problems in the area. And my question is kind of, where do you start? Is it like talking about the area? Is it talking about the plan that has been rejected and going through it? What do you foresee for how it's going to start?
I think personally that before any community engagement, that the team really has to come to a clear, common understanding of the goal of the plan. With a new boundary, the goal is somewhat different than the previous process. So that would be my thinking behind what the planning team would do once it gets together, is they would have to have a very deliberate process to go through a common understanding of what the goals of the plan are, and then they design the next steps following that.
So what I'm understanding you're saying is they're going to have to get together and figure out what the starting point is and how to go about engaging it.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of material, somebody else brought this up, that's been generated, but
Yeah.
people are at different places with knowledge about that material or understanding about what the goals of the plan really are.
And support or the credibility they give the materials, I think, is going to be
Exactly.
highly variable. Thank you.
Commissioner Borowski?
Couple of questions. One has to do with the southern border. As of right now, is the green line, is that all within the friendly area neighbors?
Yes.
So was that part of the reason why it wasn't extended south? If you go south of 29, do you get into other neighborhood associations?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, so I understand why that's done, because that just makes it more complicated, because you're bringing in other players. But if I am a homeowner across 29th, at 29th and High on the south side, I'm just as affected as the homeowner on 29th and High on the north side. And to draw the line because it brings in another neighborhood association, I don't know if that's the correct way. I can see why it was done, to make things smoother and easier, but I don't know if that's the right way, and I don't know the answer to that. I just wanted to bring that up. The other thing that I wanted to mention is you talked about this triple bottom line committee to vet things, and you said that it would be used, you would use existing boards and commissions that the city already has to draw from. And I heard sustainability and some of the other ones. The one area that I don't think that the city has boards and commissions on as far as triple bottom line is the economic development side of that. So I'm just wondering where you think you're going to draw that leg of the stool from if you're drawing from city boards and commissions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know there are members on the Sustainability Commission that view their participation as being from an economic prosperity perspective. But really, I should have said this before, the triple bottom line sounding board as an idea is something that John Reese is really interested in doing for the city as a whole. And I think that's a really valid point. It'll have to be part of his kind of thought process about who to appoint and who might need to be brought in if there isn't adequate representation on a city board.
Yeah, and I think that especially in this situation where the majority of the red area is commercial, to have that interest, whether it's from the chamber, whether it's from, I don't know where John looks to drive it, but I think that if it's three-legged stool of triple bottom line, I think you tip over if you don't have one of the legs.
Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, I have one new question, and the others I probably didn't phrase correctly, because I would have liked to have had a response. So
Okay.
Let me go back again, and I kind of understand the first one more now that I know the green area was primarily one neighborhood. If the south area is extended, will some of those areas that are other surrounding neighborhoods then have a vote?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about this at the neighborhood board meeting, so without trying to speak for them, this was a huge topic of conversation at all the meetings that we were at. How to do this, we haven't really attempted a mixed-use development plan like this in an area that crosses neighborhood boundaries. And so I think we're kind of charting new territory with this. The most recent example, the Walnut Station mixed-use development area, was wholly within Fairmount. And so that really simplified the participation and the structure of the teams that were formed for that area. What I can tell you is that through their discussions and their votes, the neighborhoods voted unanimously to do it this way and for their own reasons. So,
Well, the only problem I have with that is if it does include the south area, when you're looking at major corridors, you can't do something there and not impact north and south of that particular corridor.
Right.
And if you don't have a vote, you can always say, well, then why do I have a buy-in? And you just have more problems at the end again when you go to the city council by those people saying, we never even had a vote in this, and this is how it's going to impact us. So I just bring that to your attention. My other phrase that I said earlier was, are you going to use deliverables that have already been made? In other words, a lot of the material you've already developed for this particular area.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I would hope that there's a lot of useful material in there. Somebody else brought up kind of the readiness or receptiveness to that is going to depend on a strong process that's set up to build trust. And so I think that's our number one priority right now, is to try to get off with a process that people feel good about, and we can move forward without leading up to a fight. So it may take some time before we're able to.
Well, it's not a fight.
Get there.
It's just showing this is the work that was done. You can either accept or reject
Absolutely.
it. Absolutely.
It's there as a resource.
Because there's really good components.
Yep.
My other question was, is I still want to hear, when the Planning Commission direction and the team presents direction, are they presenting our direction, or do we not say anything, or does staff speak for us to the council? Will they hear two different things, what the team thinks and what the Planning Commission thinks? I have a problem here with that, and I want to clarify that.
Yeah, I think it depends. All the details can't be fleshed out at this point in time, but I think past examples have shown us that it's possible for a team working on an area to present to the Planning Commission and gain the Planning Commission's support. I think it's also possible that you would disagree with the team's recommendation, and so we kind of have to cross that bridge when we come to it.
Hasn't it been crossed before? Because other refinement plans and modifications have come through and generated at the local level, and they must have, was that the way it was done? They presented it and the commission presented something to the council, or was it unanimous agreement through the process?
I think with Walnut, it probably came from the Planning Commission directly to the council, but it may have been handled differently for EWAB. I think we need a certain amount of flexibility.
Jefferson West Side was handled a little different, wasn't it?
Question. Yeah, I'm not sure which one. There've been a number of them. Robin's got a comment.
Yeah, I think we'll go back and look at how all those processes worked. I think the bottom line is that your charter requires you to make a recommendation to council.
Yep.
That's always the way we operate with any project. Generally, there's staff involved, and it's part of staff's responsibility to bring the project to Planning Commission, to work with you to the satisfaction of the commission, to make sure there's a recommendation that actually can go to council. So that's still your role. That hasn't changed. It's changed the charter. So I believe Planning Commission still has to make a recommendation one way or the other to the City Council for any legislative activity that involves land use.
I understood that, Robin. That's why I had a question with this, because we didn't get to present it to the council according to the way this is written, and that's why I was worried.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point of clarification.
Okay, and now a new question, my last one in the second round. Your last page, why does this take 6 months to adopt? I mean, if you're having buy-in all the way, it goes through us. I can't understand why there's a blue line for 6 months to get it adopted.
That's pretty fast, actually.
Yeah.
It's just the timelines for amending a code or adopting a plan require 3 basic steps for the Planning Commission in work sessions, hearing, deliberation, and then 3 for the council as well, work sessions, hearing, and deliberation. So it's just kind of a calendar function.
So I have myself in the queue, and then I have Commissioner Baker. Oh, yes, and Commissioner Borowski, thank you. I just wanted to bring up Walnut Mixed Use Station, just as a reference. Even though it was all within one neighborhood association, there was a line in terms of where that overlay exists. And I just want to make sure that if this process, assuming this process does move forward, that there's an awareness by neighborhood associations of what that impact is. I know from the Fairmount perspective, I know it was mixed when development started occurring, realizing what happened to the other side of 15th. And because the plan was actually fairly comprehensive, and 15th had similar type zoning across the street. So it's basically a warning, be careful what you ask for. And just really make sure there's a level of awareness of what it means by neighborhood associations. So maybe potentially remaining, I'm not sure if it's totally open, but maybe have options. Yeah. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, a couple of things. I wanted to agree with a number of other commissioners. I think that it would be worth considering a map change where the study area covers the commercial property across the street and the green area expands to the, to the yellow that you're showing there on the cross laminate. The other suggestion that I wanted to make, and I think in this case, the planning team, I think it would be useful if there was at least one, maybe two planning commissioners that are ex officio members of that team, if that's a good way. I mean, one of the problems that we have is, these things sort of get developed and sometimes we see snapshots along the way. But if a planning commissioner is there to discuss perspectives, they can sometimes bring back, two more small items. It might be worth, traditionally our process is things come to us, the staff agrees with it, and then comes to us. We don't discuss it, and the staff revises it. It's sort of like we send our changes along with the staff. It would be nice if we're trying a new process that we have an extra step there where the staff puts together a plan. It's discussed with us. Maybe some changes are made that way that are straightforward, and where there's disagreement, then then the revised version is sent to the council, and planning commissioners can send an additional report. That's just a suggestion. And the third thing that I think is worth considering is the funding issues, particularly for certain key elements that I think are what is partly hampering the redevelopment of the northern part of this study area, and that is power lines above grade that are blocking sidewalks and making it unattractive to move around easily. And so EWEB doesn't have money to fund that. So it's sort of like from the get-go realize if that's an important element in improving this area, you've got to figure out a funding source. We know that the Public Works is going to replace the sidewalks. They have a plan and a budget to do that, but that has nothing to do with underground and utilities, and it certainly wouldn't make sense to do that and then dig it all up 10 years from now to underground the utilities. That's just the way, unfortunately, our government works, but it just is not a very efficient way of doing things. So even if we aren't going to do it now, we should get a commitment that EWEB drops in all the conduits, those plastic conduits that are really cheap, put the conduits in now so that you don't have to dig everything up 10 years from now when you decide you need to do it because you've got some development going on there that insists that the utilities be undergrounded before it builds its project. It's just good.
I want to clarify one thing I wanted to say, just because the public's listening, that the Walnut Mixed-Use Station is not an overlay, it's a special areas district, so I just didn't want to pass poor information. So Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, my comment goes to developing the budget for this, and the squeaky wheel factor. So this has had a lot of testimony and things at City Council, and it appears like it's being fast-tracked. I just want to remind Robin, and I hope that you bring this up when you're doing your presentations, that there are several other neighborhoods that have been put off on hold for years that were squeaky wheels years ago because of problems that have developed in the University neighborhood, in the River Road, Santa Clara area, and we have patiently been said, they say, wait, when Envision Eugene's done, we're going to get to you, wait. And to have something like this come in and jumpstart and go in front of that, I think would be wrong, considering one of the reasons that Commissioner Taylor's suggested. It's already zoned that mixed use can occur there. Some of these areas have development impacts that are outside of the scope of what is in code right now. And so when I look at this timeline, is the timeline just to get the draft approved, or is this timeline for a refinement plan? Because the way I look at this timeline, it's all in this year, and it's using staff resources that have been promised to other neighborhoods for ongoing years, and it really concerns me. And if the case is that this is going to jump to the front of the queue, then I know some wheels that are going to start squeaking really loud, because it's just not appropriate, I feel. And so I hope at least when you make your presentations, you bring that up to the staff.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I mean, really that's the point I made initially, and it's that triple bottom line, that higher level, and it's really an issue of economics and equity. I mean, we have a big city, and there are a lot of communities that have been waiting a long time. So just re-looking at it. Robin.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, and we feel the same way. We hear from a lot of folks. In fact, we hear from folks in other neighborhoods in addition to the ones that you mentioned. I met with a different one just last week. So, yes, I think one of the things that we've been flagging and will flag for council is that we really don't have a budget identified for this, or how this fits in with the work plan is unclear. How this falls in terms of priorities with the other work that's been promised is also unclear, so we'll have to request clarity on that.
And this timeline, is that for the plan? Or can you explain that timeline a little more?
Sure. The timeline is very drafty, first of all, and has yet to have a budget to accompany it. So it's kind of step one of a staff proposal that would be more complete with a budget outline. But yeah, the thinking behind this would be that it would be a focused refinement plan that would in a lot of conversations with the neighborhoods, this actually came up, like start with the things that are most pressing and don't bite off more than you can chew, basically, with this. So it was an attempt to outline a process that would be limited, both in geographic scope and in breadth of the items tackled. So yeah, that would be adoption of a skinny, focused refinement plan.
So are there draft timelines for the South University one that has been promised? Is a draft timeline for the River Road Santa Clara one that has been promised?
Yeah.
And would those be good to be presented next to those and say which one of these are your priorities, City Council?
I think that's where we're going with a conversation that looks at the whole work plan.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You brought up the composition of the planning team, Commissioner Jaworski, earlier with the renters. Was there a question you wanted answered about that component?
Well, when I looked at, I don't know how many renters are in this commercial area. That's why I was saying, I understood when we looked at the yellow on 24th and thereabouts and out to the east, et cetera. But I didn't understand why they would have such a heavy weighting if it's just this commercial zone. So
got it.
That's the only reason I brought that up. Not that I'm anti-renters, it's just
right.
the relationship to others. You know, how are they going to be impacted any more than a single-family resident owner or something in that same general area?
Right. So this was a big topic, again, mostly at the Friendly Area Neighbors meeting. And the thinking behind their motion, I think, was that it's inclusive of the whole green area would be where the red, so that includes the commercial red area and also the surrounding yellow area. 3 to 5 residents, people who live there, of which 2 should be renters. So there was a lot of discussion about making sure that renters have a voice and kind of reserving slots for them, I think was where they landed. But it could be a renter of a single family home in the yellow area, or it could be a renter of an apartment in the red area. Doesn't matter.
I'm glad to hear that you've said it multiple times now when you've discussed with the neighborhoods this and they came up with that, which I sometimes get confused. We received some emails as commissioners saying that they have had no input in this, and that's not what I'm getting from you. I'm getting that they have had input in this. Okay, I just, good.
Yeah, they have, and certain aspects, and it's a complicated proposal, right? So there's a few aspects they've had a lot of discussion about, including the boundary and the planning team composition. I think it's the rest, the process, the timeline, the kind of what are we going to do once there's a team established that has a lot of input yet to be taken in and worked through as we get further down the road.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, first of all, I actually want to commend the planning team for working on this and doing a good job. I just had a similar suggestion about the 3 to 5 business owners that, and what I assume you mean is people that have businesses and or property owners. You might want to also have the similar stipulation that at least, or some number of which are leaser,
Tenants.
tenants rather than all property owners, just so you make sure you have a nice balance of people that are running businesses there and people that own the ground underneath them.
Thanks.
So you might have already answered this. Can you just remind me, has staff done a full assessment of refinement plans? Has that been done? Because, as you know, all of them are outdated, many decades. So has there been an assessment of refinement plans, or is this really what's happening is just as they come up? Like, what is that process? What?
About that?
Not really, but there's...
You can get back to me on that question. You don't have to answer it today.
To my knowledge, there isn't any kind of a comprehensive assessment of refinement plans, what the status is, when they're supposed to be updated, what the order would be if that were to happen. My observation of the process for deciding is more based on where is the energy in the community and how does that get manifested in terms of
Squeaky wheel.
Right?
These three that were mentioned today, so South Willamette, River Road, and University area neighborhoods were all included in the 2012 Envision Eugene recommendation as priority areas. So at that time, in 2012, the South Willamette work was already in motion, but it was included in the recommendations to finish that project. And then the other two were, as Commissioner Borowski mentioned, slated to begin after EGB adoption.
And I guess I'd also point out that times have changed a lot since we started creating refinement plans in Eugene. The goals of planning a different, I think this is why we'd evolved the conversation from the neighborhood refinement plan to more of an area planning type of approach, because the needs are different. And the most recent refinement plans that the city had done are associated with Walnut Station, with the UF downtown, and so they had a refinement policy component, a refinement plan policy component that went along with the code changes for each part of town, because there had been so many refinement plans in the past that had action items that weren't acted upon because we're busy doing other things. So I think it's been not only a squeaky wheel, but it's also been a needs-based kind of approach. Where in the community are things likely to be changing quickest, soonest? And that was part of the decision-making around South Willamette as an area. Not only had there been a need from the neighborhood association's perspective and also the Southtown Business Association at the time, but in the assessment of the citywide commercial areas that we did as part of Envision Eugene, this was one of just a few areas of town that actually had the potential eventually where redevelopment would be financially feasible. It's still, there's still a gap there, but this was one of those areas. So that's partly why it rose to the top.
Thank you. It's a great description. Commissioner Baker?
Just a quick, actually just a possible request or something. It might be useful if you could put together a list for our educational purposes of all the refinement plans and when they were adopted, chronologically. That would at least give us a kind of a bird's eye view of what some of us may be dealing with over the future.
It is online, and it's actually comprehensive with the dates.
List of them on the
Okay, great.
Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't have a wheel, but I try to be squeaky here for 7 years, but anyway. I liked what you said about refinement plans and when you prioritize other ones, because I missed the 2012 issue, but as far as getting it to something officially, is that I like what you said about it's where growth and development is occurring. It's one thing to say that in 20 years it's anticipated where it may be, but we have places where it's occurring right now, that refinement plans are 30-plus years old, so it's not working that way. And I don't know how that gets to be a priority unless you consider what you said.
Yeah, just specifically for Northeast neighbors.
Well, yeah, and I also said that refinement plans, when they were initially done, were so huge, you don't have to come back and do an area that's now, 4 neighborhoods. The other neighborhoods may have not changed any, and I'm just saying in our area, but it might be the same in other areas. There are focused areas, and I like the idea of focused refinement plans or area plans to really address where the problems are within those gigantic area plans that were done before.
Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, just one final comment, and it kind of goes to something that Commissioner Baker brought up a long time ago, is I think that a lot of from what I heard when I was going to some of the South Willamette listening groups and things like that, there was a lot of buy-in on the way that they wanted the commercial district to look, that that they like the setbacks, they like those types of things. And I think what we see with the way that the bowling alley is going to be redeveloped, that I think incentives are going to have to be a big part of whatever we have going forward. Because we have a shovel to the ground example of it doesn't pencil out to go up on South Willamette. Because if it did, the bowling alley wouldn't be 1 story. That's a big enough piece of ground, and a brown, it was shovel ready because of the fire, and they didn't have to pay to tear it down, and it still didn't pencil out to go up. So I think that if what we heard from the neighbors saying, yeah, I would like this to be a walkable area, this and that, incentives are going to have to be a big part of this equation in that area, because it doesn't pencil out to make it look the way that the people want it to look. So that's just my 2 cents going forward.
Are there any other comments or questions for staff? Okay, staff, do you have any remaining comments? I'm going to go back to the public. We have some time. Do you have any comments? Yes. Come on up.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ed McMahon, Home Builders Association of Lane County, 1065 River Road. Just a caution when we get to the end of the road. I'm concerned staff doing all this great work, but what I also notice is I'm involved in the Santa Clara Neighborhood Association, and I believe there's 7 of us on our board. We've done major reach out to the neighborhood, and I think we've connected with maybe 700 more, but we represent 32,000 citizens. So one of my primary concerns is working so close with the neighborhood associations and getting their input, but there's a large percentage of other citizens out there that may not be participating until it gets right down to the wire and it hits the public again. Just very concerned about all this good work going out there with that roadblock in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, come on up. I figure if I ask you 3 times, you'll...
My name is Dennis Cassidy, and I just appreciate the interest in possibly looking south of 29th as a cutoff point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, have a great Monday. That adjourns today's meeting.